Yes, said Shuga, and you're to deliver them. Seeing the hunter raise an eyebrow, he hastily amended, and I don't mean as a messenger. You'll be tutoring the prince yourself. You and all your men. Master Shuga, said Mon, we're assassins and bodyguards, not professors. Well, Shuga said snootily, now you're both. He didn't see the face Mon gave him as he turned his back and swept out of the room. Later that day, Mon gathered the other hunters and presented them with a new shift schedule that had them all a little confused. Normally, the schedule would say who was supposed to be on guard duty when, who was supposed to be out on a spy job and what, and whether any of them had any special missions, which usually meant assassinations. But today, there were unfamiliar tasks mixed in with the usual ones. What's this, sir? Said Sun, perplexed, pointing to the schedule. Poetry lessons? Is this some kind of special training? Mine says geography, said Taga. We're each learning a different subject. No, said Mon. You're each teaching a different subject. We're assisting Masters Shuga and Gakkai in tutoring the Crown Prince. The men stared at him. Hey, it wasn't my idea, said Mon. Don't look at me. Hyoku was teaching literature. Zen would be teaching Kanbalese. Jin would be teaching Sangalese. And Rai would be teaching Talsh. Mon would be in charge of math and the economics lessons given him by Toya and Saya. It was a full schedule. I should have been the history tutor, Hyoku grumbled as the briefing ended. Odo's just going to make it boring. I don't understand why we're expected to teach, Jin said. What brought this on, anyway? Well, Sun said confidentially, a little birdie told me that Shuga and Gakkai were having another tiff, and Gakkai threatened to expose Shuga's illicit activities. Jin flushed red from indignation. There's gossip like that floating around the Imperial Palace? Sun's chuckle was almost a giggle. Nothing quite so interesting, though Gakkai was trying to claim that Shuga and our crown prince were closer than they should be, but everyone knows that's ridiculous. No, Gakkai threatened to reveal that Shuga was meeting with that magic weaver outside the palace walls. That could get him kicked out of the Star Palace if it were known. Jin nodded to understanding. So Crown Prince Chagum decided what? To have them co-teach along with us? It seems that Gakkai wanted to be Crown Prince Chagum's tutor, Sun said. Gakkai is jealous of his place. I think this is the Crown Prince's way of being as fair as possible to both Shuga and Gakkai, though there seems to be a bit of artistic license in how he decided to honor Gakkai's request. He could at least have asked us first, said Hyoku with a scowl. Or at least get our input on the assignments. Jin frowned. Why is Rado the middle... God. And why is Rado the military science teacher? As if His Highness needs more Yugurakus in his life. He doesn't deserve that kind of stress. I just can't stand to see him moping around like this. We've got to figure out a way to cheer him up. Maybe start by making your lessons interesting, said Mon, looking unamused, and figure out how to sneak that Yaku girl into the palace. Sir, said Rai, we received word from Princess Saruna. She'll be making a diplomatic visit at the end of the week. We can sneak Nimka in by having her pose as part of the princess's entourage. We've already asked, and she's amenable to the plan. Mon blinked, pleasantly surprised. Finally, some good news. Well, until then, keep your eyes and ears open, and better start brushing up on your teaching skills. Meanwhile, Chagum sat at the edge of a pretty rock-lined pond in the garden outside his baths. From here, he could look down at the city and imagine being able to leave the palace and see his friends again. He sighed. All this nonsense about rumors and tutors and secret loves. All he really wanted was to go literally anywhere that wasn't here and live like a person again. He considered which career he would pick, if he were a commoner. A shopkeeper, like Toya and Saya. A gambler. He knew he'd be very good at that. Or maybe a hekimum merchant. Then he could have all the hekimums he could ever dream of. I miss Tonda, he thought sadly. I wonder what Balsa is doing right now. I wonder if she and Tonda ever did get married like I told them to. Here Balsa and Tonda had their own true loves right in front of their noses, and they didn't even seem to care. Ruin, he said, calling his attendant over, do me a favor and bring Shuga here. Tell him I have a message I want him to take to a friend. He'll understand. Of course, your majesty, Ruin replied. The servant left the room running. On his way, he stopped. He didn't know where to look first to find Shuga-sama, but it was urgent and an important duty. Chagum was counting on him. Try to look in his office, you silly, said a little voice in his head. Of course, the office was the main place where Shuga could obviously be. Ruin turned the corner, climbed up the stairs, and went through a corridor. There was a door at the end. He rushed to it and knocked, always using the polite manners. There was no answer. He tried to open the door and to take a peek, shyly, but there was no one. Ruin entered the room on tiptoe and looked at the amazing room of Shuga. Then a sound was heard at the back of the room. When Ruin found Shuga, he uttered a little cry of surprise. Shuga-sensei, what are you doing with a wig? The wig was in a pinkish color that hurt his eyes. Ruin blinked, then heaved a sigh of relief. What he had taken to be a pink wig was simply the sunset colors shining through Shuga's white hair. Ruin must have been running too fast. He was seeing things. Lord Shuga, Crown Prince Chagum has summoned you. Really? Then I'll come at once, Shuga said. Did he summon all of his instructors, or simply me? Just you, Lord Shuga. He said he had a message he wanted you to take to someone. Shuga nodded and followed Ruin back to the second palace. Crown Prince Chagum was sitting on a low cushion in his chambers with his head down. Your Majesty, Shuga said. Shuga. Chagum smiled. I'm glad you're here. I'd like you to take a message to Tonda for me. I will take a message to the herbalist on one condition, Your Majesty. You must tell me the name of the girl you've fallen in love with. Chagum's eyes narrowed. I thought I told you to stop asking. Yes, but Your Highness, no, said Chagum, standing. If you're going to be a dick, then I'll get someone else to carry my message. Before Shuga could protest, Chagum stomped to the door of the palace, where a pair of Imperial guards had just shown up to relieve the two guards already on shift. Chagum addressed one of the newcomers. Jin, you know how to get to Tonda's hut, correct? The hunter, startled at being recognized, immediately went down on one knee and bowed. Yes, Your Highness. Good. Here, I need you to take this letter there and give it to him. You can also give it to Torugai or Balsa if Tonda isn't there. Please leave right away. Jin took the letter, speechless. He gave an apologetic look to his fellow hunter, who Chagum recognized but couldn't recall the name of, then bowed low and hurried off. Shuga stared in dismay. Does the prince like him more than me? I'm not telling you who she is, Chagum said coldly, and he swept back inside his room like an icy wind. Jin, in the meantime, went directly to the stables, then rode fast for Tonda's hut. He would deliver the letter, but he also resolved to use this opportunity to ask Tonda's advice on how to cheer his Highness up. He couldn't stand to see Prince Chagum so sad and lonely, and it would still be several days before Princess Saruna's arrival. Tonda would surely have some ideas on how to keep His Majesty's spirits up until then. The messenger arrived at Tonda's hut near dawn, carrying Crown Prince Chagum's message. Tonda was awake, making breakfast in front of a low fire. The messenger passed a scroll of rice paper to Tonda and withdrew. You see, we're being typically Japanesely vague about who the messenger is all of a sudden. So Chagum's in trouble, he muttered down at the message. He read and cooked at the same time. It seemed that he would have to go to Kosenkyo. The problems Crown Prince Chagum was complaining of couldn't be fixed easily from afar. He also decided to send a message to Balsa so that she would know where he was. If she was close enough, she might be able to come to Kosenkyo herself. Nobles have the thorniest problems, Tonda complained to his stewpot. He could guess where Crown Prince Chagum was now, at his brother's grave, meeting with his secret love in utmost secrecy. It's extra secret. Jin had told him that Chagum was taking more and more time alone lately, and Jin gave him more privacy than most of the hunters. Chagum believed that her identity was not known, but Shuga and the hunters were persistent. It was only a matter of time before they found her out. Tonda would find it odd that Chagum used visiting his brother's grave as an excuse for a lover's tryst if he didn't know the identity of the girl. Chagum always had a soft spot for those who had been cast out and dispossessed. You haven't read the message, Tonda said, setting the letter down. No, it wasn't addressed to me. Why? Tonda shook his head. I just wondered, that's all. Tonda-san, Jin began, looking suddenly uncomfortable the way he usually did when he was trying to start a conversation. The prince, he's been very sad lately. I believe he misses you and the spear wielder, and, he's also in love. Is he now? Thought Tonda wryly. Of course, we've tried to bring the girl to him, but he won't tell us her identity, so it's really just a guess, and they won't get here till the end of the week. I wondered if you might have any ideas for how to lift his mood until then. I'd sneak you into the palace yourself, but if you were caught... I understand, said Tonda, imagining his head rolling on the palace floor. Jin, the girl who's coming to see him, who is it? I probably shouldn't tell you, but, we had two possibilities and decided to hedge our bets. So it's actually two girls. Princess Saruna Songal, whom His Highness befriended while he was on a diplomatic envoy there earlier in the year, and Nimka, a Yaku girl he met in Tomi village while he was living with you and the Spirit Wielder. Nimka is... He stopped abruptly. Tonda-san, I've just figured out how to get you into the palace. And this won't involve my possible execution, right? Jin nodded, almost smiling. It's completely foolproof. It's how we're getting Nimka in to see him. When he sees you there, he'll be overjoyed, whether it's Nimka or Saruna he loves or not. Of course, it won't work for Balsa-san. She's too recognizable. But you've got a dark enough complexion, I think. Eagerly, he explained the plan. Tonda had to admit that it was a good one. By the time Jin had returned to the palace, he almost couldn't wait to tell Mon the good news. His Highness would be so happy, he thought, if only they could enact the plan tonight. Jin and Tonda returned to the palace around nightfall. I guess they're enacting the plan already, anyhow. Along the way, Tonda tried to coax more information out of Jin, since it seemed impossible for him not to know the true identity of the girl Chagum was in love with. It seems that Chagum is spending more time than usual at his brother's grave, Tonda said. Yes, Jin sighed. That's another reason that you really should come and see him. Grief might be the root of the whole thing. Have you gone with him to the grave? Jin glanced at him sidelong. A few times. Then you know that it's not Saruna or Nimka he's thinking of. He paused. Right? Jin sighed. He told you all that. Well, I guess I should have known, since he trusts you. But you can't tell another soul. It would be a scandal. I don't see why. She's noble and he loves her. They probably bonded over Chagum. But the Mikado isn't reasonable about these things, Jin said. Something in his eyes was haunted. Tana nodded shallowly. But he listens to the star readers, doesn't he? To portents and omens? Sometimes. It's all in the optics for him, how things look. He's always trying to appear to be a god. You don't think he is one? No person is a god, Jin said firmly. Blasphemy from a high noble. Interesting. I don't care about religion, I care what's true. He sighed. I've been keeping the secret for as long as I can. If you have a way to bring it to light without getting His Majesty in trouble, I'm all ears. Tonda thought for a moment. Well, you're dressing me as a star reader to get into the palace. Maybe I can find some omens that would be auspicious for Chagum marrying the girl, Tonda said. Clearly the plan changed somewhere in there. Off screen, we didn't see it. Don't get too creative with the role, herbalist, said Mon with a frown, who's suddenly there. This is only so that you can visit with the crown prince. It's not for you to play fortune teller. Got it? Got it, said Tonda. Good. Mon didn't smile. Now put this on. 30 minutes later, Shuga went into Crown Prince Chagum's palace to begin the day's lessons, trailed by another unfamiliar star reader, and, of course, Sun and Hyoku to teach poetry and literature. The two hunters exchanged glances. They were in on the secret, but being coy just in case Gakkai was watching. Your Highness, said Shuga, we're here for your lessons. I'll be teaching you political theory from now on, and I'll have help for the other subjects. Today is literature and poetry, and I have a special guest teacher here from the Star Palace to teach you herbal medicine. Chagum looked up sharply. That was not one of the subjects he had been studying. His eyes connected with the other star reader's face and lit up in recognition and delight. Tonda! How? What? You're here! Yes, Your Highness, said Tonda, smiling. Word reached me that you missed me, so I decided to come for a visit. If I could have brought Balsa with me, she'd be here too. But, she doesn't exactly make a convincing star reader. Chagum laughed, imagining Balsa dressed in a star reader's robe, with her spear in a little robe of its own. That's something I'd love to have seen. We'll be sure to try it next time, said Hyoku. Sun elbowed him. Shuga smiled. We'll give you two some privacy for now. I'm sure that you have a lot of catching up to do. Sun, Hyoku, would you please watch the doors? We don't want any unexpected Gakkai-shaped visitors, after all.